now. So,
Hell yeah, let's
um,
go.
let's go. Let's go. Hey everyone, we are in our Builders Office Hours. Welcome to the Builders Office Hours. This is actually my first Builders Office Hours, so I'm running this like a pilot in a plane. Honestly, there are so many things that I have to do and coordinate on. But yeah, um, really grateful the Ghost team for agreeing to do the Builders Office Hours this week. We have George and Chris from the Ghost team here. One liner about the GhostGraph is that it allows you to write indexers for your smart contracts, but you can write them in Solidity, which is super cool. When I saw the website, I have no clue how one can achieve that. But just for answer that question, we have George here and Chris here. So with that, George, please introduce yourself to everybody here and take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Harpal, for the intro. I'm George, and I work with Chris, and we're joined by Garrett from Tokiemon. We're a small team, but we are Ghost, and one of our products is called GhostGraph, which is a new kind of indexer. So thanks for having us today. So we'll kind of go over what we built and how it can work in Monad and for Monad builders. One thing that we focused on is we purpose built this indexer for fast chains like Monad, because we see that the fast next gen chains like Monad are going to 100x the typical throughput that developers are used to on EVM chains. And we think that fast chains need supporting infra that's also fast. For example, indexers. And an indexer is basically a service that takes a set of actions that happen on chain, and then it gives you a way to transform those into structured entities. And you can then query those entities from a front end or a bot or any kind of data consumer. And there are, of course, many indexers that already exist, but a lot of these legacy indexers, they were developed for kind of 12-second ETH mainnet block times, and they kind of work on L2s as well. But we think that they might have some trouble scaling to fast chains like Monad. So that's why we built GhostGraph. Um, and GhostGraph is something that sits between the smart contracts and the front end interfaces. They let you spin up APIs for smart contracts by writing a little bit of code in Solidity, so you can stay in the same language as the contract itself. So we think that helps you move fast, and it has pretty cool UX, and you can try it out for yourself. Um, here's some sorry, here's some basics on how the system works as a from a bird's eye view. So you will ingest event logs from your smart contracts, right, or anyone else's smart contracts. These are things like swap events or loan repay, loan borrow, withdraw, deposit, anything that is relevant to the app that you're building. Then you can transform those events or other inputs into entities. These are things that you might query, things like the state of a pool or user position. And then you can query those from your front end using GraphQL. And that will then empower the state and the view of your front end and show users what actions they've taken in the past or what actions are available to them right now that help you create and power front ends. And I think Chris wants to talk about these slides that are coming up.
Sure. Thank you so much, George. This is Chris, co-founder of Ghost, and we'll be talking about features that make a difference. So, write your indexer in Solidity. So why does it make sense? So first, smart contracts are typically written in Solidity, right? You can write in Python as well, but that's a different thing. Most smart contracts are written in Solidity. And state transitions are emitted through smart contract events, like George mentioned. And smart contract developers are the ones who define and emit these events. So you have to start wondering, like, why aren't the same smart contract developers who already define the events also be the one writing the backend indexers? And as existing solution out there, backend indexers are often written in assembly script, which is a different language, similar to TypeScript, right? So GhostGraph makes it very easy for one person, one backend engineer who already knows smart contract to handle the backend fully, right? Another difference is that it usually takes seconds to index. So either your iteration time really cut down by a ton by using Ghost. And we also have in-browser editor, which means that you do not have to download anything. You can jumpstart all from our browser. Our, and then if you so desire, you can also use our CLI as well. Next, please. So who should use it? So anyone, any developers and teams building decentralized application can use GhostGraph. We specifically focus on early stage startup to minimize, time to market. So imagine that you can only have two people, one backend, one front end developers. Your backend developers now can handle smart contract. It can handle the backend as well as the indexer part. And now you just need to hand off the API endpoint to your front end engineers. And you essentially will have end-to-end applications with just two people. Right. And we also have a tons of abundance example of Ghost Graph created by Ghost team and the community. So it makes it very easy to build and iterate and use them as a template. Next, please. So here are some of our protocols that use Ghost. We're currently on 6 different chains, Blast, Base, Ethereum, Berachain, Abstract, and Unichain. So some of the use cases for like a few protocols, such as ProtoCat, which is an NFT mint collection. They used Ghost because they want to display all the real-time mints to transparently show data to their users. And we have another protocol called Honeypot Finance, which is a DEX as well as a Launchpad. Using Ghost, they're able to retrieve pools as well as Launchpad list, along with some derived data such as participation count as well as derived USD values. And we have other example as well. Later on, Tokiemon Garrett is going to talk about how he's using Ghost for. Next, please. And here is just a QR code for our documentation if you want to dive in deeper to see some of the example, some of the protocol that's using Ghost at the moment, as well as a guide on a step-by-step on how to create Ghost Graph from scratch, as well as blog articles that include end-to-end walkthrough on creating a whole D app using Ghost Graph, as well as creating smart contract and front end. Yeah. Next. Great. So that concludes my presentation. Next, we have Garrett, who's founder of Tokiemon, and he will be walking through us how he used Ghost for.
Cool. Thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate the overview and appreciate the introduction. Let me share my screen and I will get started. So as Chris mentioned, I am not affiliated with the Ghost team. I am just a builder who loves GhostGraph. So I can give you a real world example of how I'm utilizing it. And if you have any questions or inputs or want to stop me halfway through, feel free. Can you all see my screen?
We can see your screen.
Yeah.
Perfect. So as mentioned, I am the founder of Tokiemon.io, which is a game on Base. Effectively, the concept of the game is like generative Pokemon. Here are all my monsters. There are lots of things you can do in the game, and lots of things that are powered by GhostGraph that I'll get into in just a moment. Predominantly, we power things like the battle history here on how all of our battles are counted on chain and tracking those logs via a GhostGraph. And then we also use several other things such as the leaderboard to ingest data and display like some sophisticated things to users so they can see how well they're performing against others, how well their community is performing, so on and so forth. So I'll get into the gameplay and exactly how GhostGraph is utilized in just a second, but I thought it'd be fun to just quickly go over how I build with GhostGraph so you can see a real world example of what a builder might do and how they might utilize this. So I'll keep things simple. Typically, my workflow involves forking from my existing graphs and iterating on those, and I'll show you some benefits of that in just a minute. But generally, if you're starting with GhostGraph, creating a graph is the natural starting point. I'll just call it Tokiemon test for now, and I'll go ahead and create the index. My game is on base, so I'll leave the chain as base, but they do have, of course, lots of options. So it creates this templated graph and generates two files initially, the events file and the schema file. The events file is really convenient because all I have to do is copy paste the events directly from my smart contract, and I don't have to worry about refactoring my events to some other language, opining on them or in some way. I can literally just copy paste the events into here. Additionally, I can also use their events fetcher. So let's say I want to pull in events from my Tokiemon NFT contract here. I can use this event fetcher, grab the ABI from a verified contract on base scan in my instance, copy this, dump that in, fetch the events, and I can just manually import each one of these events already without even having copy and paste. So it saves me a lot of time effectively as a developer on the events side of things. Once I've defined my events, and I'll just do one for the simplified version of this example, I go over to the schema file. This is essentially my database structure file. What data do I want to store and to be able to query later? So once again, I'll pull from a previous graph that I've done and briefly explain it. Basically, you define structs. Structs typically, for me, map pretty closely to the events that are defined here. For instance, I have like an ID, battle ID, all the data about the battle so that I can manipulate it later. And then I also have some metadata about the transaction that I like to store because we recreate the randomness of the battle using things like the transaction hash. So that's really important for us to have in game, as well as created that in block just for timing purposes and general best practices. So once I've populated my events and my schema, I click this generate code button, and it will generate all of these helper files and one more file that I need to edit, which is essentially the bridge between the events and the schema, where I define how I want to manipulate my events, and I can import them into schemas however I choose. Additionally, in this indexer file, I define which contracts that I want to track. And this is another thing I really enjoy about GhostGraph. I don't have to define start blocks. I don't have to do a lot of manipulation. I can literally just dump in all the contracts. And I don't even have to map this contract needs to look for this events. I just say, hey, here's my contracts. Find all the events that are applicable to all these contracts. The easiest way to add a contract is graph.register handle. So basically, I'll just copy one of my battle contracts here and drop it in. And then on battle complete is a generated function based on my event where I define on a battle complete event, what do I want to have happen? So for this event in particular, I'm basically exactly what I said, mapping from the information on the actual transaction and the event that occurs to my schema to define that. So I will grab that from some previous work I have done and drop it in here. And effectively, what I'm doing is I'm getting the event here with this first line item, graph.getBattleComplete, and I get it by the ID. Then I pull in lots of information that is broadcasted on that event. So battle ID, winner, challenger, opponent on this EV object, and I get all these elements on this EV object that maps to this event here. And then on the metadata side of things, I generally use this details.block. So if I want to add the block to the schema, I use details.block, details.transaction hash, details.timestamp. so on and so forth. And then I save the battle complete so that it gets added to my database so I can query it later. So with all that done, I have my events defined, my schema defined, my indexer showing which contracts are relevant and how I want to manipulate those events. I compile code, and then I simply deploy the graph. So, I mean, I've talked a lot. So basically, if I was, doing this on my own, in under a minute, I have a functioning working graph that is indexing and allows me to query and can be used in chain, on chain. So this queried 11,000 entities in 6 seconds, which is like saves me so much time as a developer. Some of my production graphs have up to 200,000 plus entities, and those syncs take like 20 seconds. So, I mean, I can just rapidly iterate on adding new contracts, tweaking events, tweaking how I handle those events, tweaking my schemas, and it's very, very easy for me to use as a developer. So, pretty straightforward there. Now, how does it actually get baked into the game now that we've done all of that work? Well, we see things like the leaderboard here, where we can, go in, manipulate the data. But there's also this adventure mode that I talked about and the battle history. So I can go in, encounter a monster, decide I want to fight this monster, query or send the transaction, and that will play out an animation on our game of me versus this monster. I hope I defeat them so I can earn mana and runes. And it looks like I did. I defeated somebody cleverly named their monster D's Nuts. I defeated D's Nuts. And in my battle history, immediately it shows up right here that I won this battle. So it's just like the UI can stay in sync as close to Chainhead as I've ever seen any indexer. And I can get started up and running in 6 seconds with 1 minute of work pulling directly from my contract. So really, it's a godsend. The way I think about it is it's going to do for indexing what Foundry did for smart contract development, allowing you to use indexers in native smart contract programming languages. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. Happy to explain any particular aspect of that more. Or yeah, that's basically the TLDR of the demo.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm looking at the chat, and if anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. One question I have is probably for the Ghost team is that when I've used the graph extensively, and one of the problems was that whenever I make a change to the graph, I have to deploy it again, and I have to change my GraphQL URL and everything because every time we deploy a graph, there is a version number associated with it. So every time I deploy, it says enter a unique version number. Then I have to take that new deployed URL, change it wherever in all my front end. So how does that go with GhostGraph?
Yeah, good question. I can answer this one. So in a similar fashion, we also create one unique URL endpoint for each graph. And the reason for that is because you might have different structures and different schemas. And if the front end expects one schema, then it gets another one. There may be some breaking changes. However, what we can do, and that you just brought up a really good point, is to have a kind of internal proxy on the service side that says, okay, if it is the same schema, then you can have one standard endpoint for it. And we can definitely create that for you guys, for anybody that wants that. That's a really good feature request.
Awesome. Yeah. Just waiting for anybody else to please feel free to open up your mic and ask questions or drop them in the chat. If not, I will ask another question. What was that at syntax in Solidity at many? I don't think we had that in the example by Garrett. I'm assuming there are many such ways. Yeah.
Yeah, very good question. So we have basically made a couple updates, not updates, but like almost like a preprocessor step to code generation. So it's almost like a syntactic sugar on top of Solidity. And Mini and Belong to, and we have another one called Auto Table, to basically give you a way to set up relationships between different entities. And there's one is Belong to and one is Mini. So for example, in the example from the presentation, that not in the demo, but the one from the slide, it was validator and delegator. So one validator has multiple delegations, and one delegator points to a validator. So there are ways to set up relationships because that helps you create the GraphQL schema. So you can do things like nested filters, and you can do things like give me all the delegations for this validator, as you might expect from if you're coming from the graph, for example. And there's ways in the graph to set up these relationships. So we let you do that in Solidity by having syntactic sugar on top of Solidity.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I will deep dive into the docs and see what are other features that are available.
And I think if we still have a little bit of time, would love to show one of the feature that we thought the newcomer may be interested in. So let me just share my screen real quick.
Sure. We actually have a lot of
Let's-
time.
Perfect. Yeah, so one of the cool feature that we have is called on the tab on the left side hand side, you can see the indexes as well as library. The library is actually our GhostGraph community libraries that you can filter by various chain, like Ethereum, Unichain, etc. So here we have extensive libraries that's created by either the Ghost team or the community. Actually, like some of our users created, they want to try USDC, NFT, or various protocol they can use to inspire them on how to use GhostGraph. One, one of our biggest library is probably Bera chains, tons of Bera chain. So yeah, you can like play around with it. You can go to like, let's say Barry from the Barra chain team created this POL tech where you can see essentially like a friend tech fork with additional sugar. And here you can see Hapa, Hapa that
Yeah.
if we want to have one user and a user can have many tray, we can use this syntactic sugar to link tray object along with the users, right? And then now later on, then you can query and why not. So if you want to just play around with this, you can simply fork it and click on it, compile, deploy, and in a matter of a few seconds that you can see, hey, this is, I can play around with the data by going to my playground. Now we can go to playground and you can just play around with the tray. You can go to user, you can go and see user's ID and get the tray from the ID and why not, so on and so forth. Right here. Yeah.
Yep. Looks good. Yeah, I was gonna ask like where's the query interface, but you just showed it. Yep.
Yeah. And so once you are happy with the playground, you can click on the query where you get the query URL that you can plug in with your front end. And yeah, we had a QR code up there previously that linked to our extensive, step by step on how to create GhostGraph, as well as blog articles on how different folks are using Ghost for, and then just walk through on how you do that. Okay.
Yeah. This is
Awesome.
definitely worth sharing with folks. But yeah, I think some new people joined. Guys, if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
I do have a question. How many of you are building applications on Mona very soon?
Um, I do have access to the DevNet. I am building some templates and content for developers. What I would I would definitely love to have some form of documentation about GhostGraph in Monad Talks as well. I will see how we can coordinate that in our Telegram group. But yeah, some form of like if we have a section in documentation, tooling and infrastructure. I would definitely love to have GhostGraph under there and see if we can have the get started guide in Monad Talks. Um, yeah.
Amazing. That would be awesome.
I guess not many people have access to the Monad DevNet, which is why not many people might be building. But yeah, when we go out, the testnet is live for people. I guess people. I'm pretty sure many would want to use GhostGraph. I think um, in general, I think the vibe is that everybody just wants to use Solidity for everything. The only thing that is not uh, not be people something that cannot build with Solidity, I believe, is front end right now, and hopefully nobody's building a Solidity front end framework. But yeah, Foundry for and then indexing, both have now both are now possible with Solidity, which is great. Is there any future where Ghost Graph allows us to pipeline the data that we have to an database? Yeah.
Yes, very good question. So we actually have this as a work in progress, where we ship you the updates, almost like it's like almost think of like a Postgres logical replication from our data store to your own. That way, if you want to run some more analytical queries, or you want to be able to join the on-chain data with off-chain data that you have it in your own personal warehouse, then you'll be able to do that.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, because I think many people like to have that database or some form of some form of aggregation that might not be possible via GhostGraph aggregation operation to show something in the front end.
Absolutely, yeah. Because when you get SQL access, then you can do just basically anything with the data. Whereas
True.
GraphQL is more like meant for real time or not so much aggregation. So we want to have you guys all have the best of both worlds.
That's true. Yep, sounds great. I think one question, just again out of the blue, do we have like logging? Like you mentioned that there are logs, but if I remember correctly, Graph allows you to have user defined logs, so I can just log something when I'm debugging something, um, be it error or info type of log. Can we do that here in GhostGraph as well?
Currently, we don't have it. I think with the current setup, you would have to create like a new structure for a log and then write to that. But I think that people have actually asked for that before. We haven't prioritized it, but I think that we should, now that you mentioned, now that I think about it, because especially for larger graphs, or when you want to look at like a window of events and you want to kind of almost do experimentation to see what is actually happening in this range, it's nice to have kind of that feedback and you don't have to make a structure for it. So we'll definitely look into that, and it should be fairly straightforward for us to implement it.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, just gonna wait a few seconds if anybody from the audience have any question. I believe Richard joined last. Hey Richard, welcome to Builders Office Hours.
So I'll just kind of talk a little bit. One thing that the Monad people might really find interesting is that Monad is obviously a parallel EVM, and because we built something that's not a fork of the graph, we actually built something called parallel indexing. Typically, most indexers will run sequentially, right? Because there's these inputs that are like events, and they get processed and transformed into entities, where you typically create or update some entity in the database, right? And then the next input is processed. And indexers will do this sequentially because the logic the processes input in might depend on the results from input in -1. For example, if in -1 is a deposit and n is a withdrawal, and you have a property like user.contributed amount, and you're updating based on deposits and withdrawals, if you run the withdrawal first, you could have an underflow, right? Or it could not be what you expect. But what we've done is we've built something similar to what Monad has for EVM execution, where we run the transform steps in parallel. And then if the inputs are different than the outputs of a previous, where in minus I is less than the transform input ID, then we reschedule to rerun those. So that means we get like a 2 to 3x execution speed up depending on the indexer and how it's set up. And then if the our case where it's purely sequential, then we can determine that and then run the rest only sequentially. But I think this is kind of cool because we actually run it in the EVM itself. Our indexer is in the EVM. So we can use a lot of the same kind of logic that even Monad itself does on the execution side. So I think it's kind of an interesting thing that I just haven't seen elsewhere.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I actually didn't envision a parallel indexer. But yeah, you are exactly right. That's exactly how the parallel EVM and on the execution side it works. Is that it starts with the same state, which is the output of the previous block for all transactions. And if there are any transactions which are dependent on each other or have any conflict when it comes to storage slots, they are scheduled for re-execution. Um, yeah, that's pretty awesome. And I envision that again, I'm not sure, but one thesis that I play around, and when I go to other people and talk about Monad is that when Monad testnet goes live, the infrastructure that is available, the level of that infrastructure would be much higher than the existing infra, because to keep up with the parallel EV and the throughput of Monad, the infrastructure providers have to go through a lot of loops and hoops in order to just keep up with the blockchain. So whichever infrastructure that is available with Monad, I think would be cutting edge. The EVM ecosystem is not ready for the type of infrastructure that's coming up. So yeah.
Yeah, we think like for sure, like when you have a fast blockchain, you need fast supporting info.
Hello. Did we? Hello. Yeah, sorry, I think I dropped off for a second. My internet just dropped. But I think what I heard last was that George speaking about the raising the bar for infrastructure. Uh,
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
I was just agreeing
Yes.
with you about supporting infra needing to match the throughput and performance of the underlying blockchain.
yeah, 100%. That's true. Okay. We're gonna wait 2 more minutes for questions. Chris, did you have anything to say?
No, we can wait for a few minutes for additional questions and then we can close it down. But yeah, I would love to, whenever Mona testnet is out there, we aim to support from day one, so that any builder who are interested in, Ghost can build on Mona with
For
Ghost.
sure.
Um, uh, as of, as of now, if you would like to try out Ghost, you can try any of the L2 or L1 that we support, such as Berachain or Base, and then migrate to Mona afterward.
Makes sense. Yep. Everybody in the call try out Ghost today. So I was recording this call, and this call will also be live on YouTube. I will share the link with you guys as well, so you can share with your community if people weren't able to join at the time of the call live.
Awesome, DeFi Lofa. Yes, if you try on base and if you have any question, feel free to contact us. We also have a Telegram channel that I can just share
Yes,
in the chat.
please share the Telegram channel.
Okay, let me see. Okay, let me just share. Let me share the Telegram chat here, Telegram channel. And if you have any question, feel free to contact us directly. We're also happy to be a sounding board as you develop your smart contract as well as your decentralized apps.
Awesome. I think we don't have any more questions. If there are any, I think people will definitely ask in the Monad developer community group or the Monad builders group. Chris and George are already in those groups. They will be happy to help you there in those groups. So feel free to ask questions there if you have any post this call when you try out uh, Ghost.
And
With that, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And I would just like to thank Garrett from Tokiemon for doing the demo and showcase what he's built with Ghost and how he's leveraged Ghost for Tokiemon. So thank you so much, Garrett.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you,
my
Garrett.
pleasure. Ghost is it's a key piece of our infrastructure, and our whole backend relies on it. And I mean, it was a very good choice that we made early on. So if anybody has any questions and wants to hear from a real user and real proponent of Ghost, feel free to message me.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Garrett, for taking out some time for the Ghost Tokiemon demo with GhostGraph. Okay, with that, we will end the call here. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, George. And again, thanks again, Garrett, for coming on this call, taking out some time, uh, spreading awareness about Ghost in the Monad community. I'm sure there will be many people who would be interested in this. Uh, Again, George and Chris, and probably Garrett as well, would be in the Telegram group of Monad developers, Monad builders. If anybody has any questions post this call, feel free to reach out. If not, just tag me. I'll be forwarding these questions to the Ghost team. And yeah, thank you for coming to the Builders Office Hours. There will be a recording of this on YouTube if you missed anything. If you came late, there will be a recording on the Monad Developers YouTube channel. Please feel free to watch the entire recording there. Thanks again, George, Chris, and Garrett for coming on. And with that, we will end the office hours.